My name's Sabina, and on this channel, we are talking about my family's journey to time freedom and financial freedom. So, we have recently found the best balance that we've ever had with income and time spent earning it. So, I thought I would tell the story of that journey up till now. That has involved some really significant life changes that we have made, priorities, jobs, lifestyle decisions that we made to get us to a place where at the moment we're about 90% happy with our time freedom situation. So if you're also looking for time freedom, I would love for you to hear my story and to just kind of see how that relates to your story. I would love to hear your stories. I have been talking about blogging on this channel for a long time. I'm continuing to do that. But I just want to tell the larger story of who our family is and what brought us to where we are, to looking for a solution that we're looking for financially. So, what happened was in 2020, we had our fourth baby. And as soon as that baby was in my arms, I knew that we couldn't keep doing what we were doing. And what we were doing at that time was my husband was trucking for a local furniture company, and he was working between 50 and 60 hours a week. And I was raising our kids by myself. Every night I did bedtime by myself. Every morning I did breakfast by myself. We saw him for about 2 hours a day, and then he would sleep in the guest room most days of the week. And I knew that we had to change it. So it took us 2 years, but we did finally get to a place we are now that is working really well for us. But I wanted to, like I said, say the whole picture. So when my husband and I met, we were actually living in residential community, is what we called it. You might call it a commune, but it was a place where a lot of people were living together. We didn't share money, but we shared resources, we shared food, and we served the other organizations that use that facility. So we kind of maintained a facility, lived there, and it was kind of crazy. When we met there, my husband had just filed bankruptcy. So he had moved across the country. He had a whole history that's really his story to tell, but it ended in filing bankruptcy right around probably 2009. At that time, I was in school. I was a resident assistant, so I went to school pretty affordably, but I got my master's degree to become a teacher, and I ended school with about $40,000 in student loan debt. So when we met, he had a clean slate and he had declared bankruptcy. He owned almost nothing. I also owned almost nothing and had $40,000 in student loan debt. Now, when we got married, he was working at a grocery store and I was teaching full time. And I love teaching. I am addicted to teaching. It is really wonderful. I'm a math teacher, and just the power and the beauty of teaching people math, like, I can't keep myself away. So that was working out fine. My husband then started working for his friend, laying tile and doing some demolition. I was still teaching. My husband then got a job delivering toilets, portable toilets to events. It was a great job because he had a great boss. And that was the job that he had when we found out that we were going to have our first baby. I was still teaching at that time, but I knew we didn't really talk about it, but I knew that I didn't want to go back to work right after having the baby. With teaching, you do have like the nice, flexible, very family friendly schedule that you're home on the weekends and you have breaks around holidays and things like that. And that was wonderful. But I grew up with a mom who did not work. My mom stayed home and took care of us. And financially, it was a big strain. My parents argued about it all the time. But that really, to me, meant that I needed to stay home when I had kids. So as soon as my baby was born, our first was born in November. So about the middle of the school year would have been when I went back. I had a meeting with my principal saying that I wasn't going back. And on maternity leave, my husband decided that he was going to also be just like his dad, and he was going to get his CDL. So we did some research, we found a program, and actually the best program in our state was actually in the town where I grew up. So he decided that we were going to move back home closer to my parents. We decided together, of course. It was really exciting. So exciting to tell my mom that her first grandbaby was coming and we were going to move back closer to them. So for 4 weeks he was training. He trained to get a CDL and was immediately hired by Pepsi. And all that time, I was home with our first baby. Um, what has happened to me every single time is I'll have a baby and I'll stay home for a year, and then I'll go back to work, get pregnant, and then take a year off. So that's what started happening. So after my first baby was about a year old, I took a job teaching math at the local high school. It was a great job. I liked it, but it was part-time. So I had not been back full-time. I just love teaching and I needed to be in that energy and I needed to be in that environment. So I went back to teaching, and my husband continued to work at Pepsi. Pepsi was physically a very demanding job. If you look at those pictures, it is probably the best shape my husband has ever been in because it was so much physical work. Unfortunately, my husband has already had 2 back surgeries in his 20s. It was too hard on his body, and we knew that it wasn't sustainable. So we started doing this thing that we've done a lot of times since, is when we're job hunting, we make a list of priorities, things that are non-negotiables for us. And at that point, since Pepsi had been so hard, one of the big things on that list was no touch freight. We wanted a trucking job where he would not have to load and unload his truck. So that was like the biggest thing on our list. We were looking for a 4-day work week as well because we just started to feel the need for more family time. And by that time, I was pregnant with our second. So we found a mail delivery job that my husband was going to do. It's a cool job where he relayed up and down the East Coast, delivering US mail. Now, he was not delivering it like people deliver to your house. He was delivering it, the big freight trucks, delivering to post offices where it would then be sorted. Well, actually, he just relayed with another driver. So he just would meet another driver, they'd switch trucks and drive back. He almost never went to post office locations. It was a great job. And then, of course, our second child was born. A year went by. I went back to teaching part-time again because I just loved it so much. And there was like a reorganization within the company. My husband got upset with the way things were handled and decided that we were going to move on to the next job. So at that point, what we were looking for was a job that was close to home, 4 days a week, no touch freight. We had a very specific list. And when we looked at that list, every single time jobs would come up and we'd say, can we take this job? The pay is good or whatever. We had that list of priorities that was really helpful in helping us decide, like, no, we can't take this job. Can we take it or can we not? And at that point, we had turned down a whole bunch because we just weren't willing to settle. Finally, he found a job that was within 10 minutes of our house, which is a big priority. It was 5 days a week. We knew we'd always have weekends off. That was one of our priorities during that job hunt. That job was really good, but became very demanding very quickly with long, long hours. That's where we were when we found out that we were pregnant with our fourth. During the pregnancy with our third, we bought a house. So now we were pregnant with the fourth baby. And again, I was working. And when we found out we were going to have this fourth baby, um, we we knew that things were going to change. It was a very chaotic time. My husband was working very early in the morning to late at night. He was sleeping in the guest room because we didn't have the same bedtime. He would have to go to bed at 3, 4, 5, or 6 o'clock, and me and the kids would go to bed at 8-ish. And so we were very much living kind of parallel lives, and it was difficult for me to understand why he could never be focused on home things. And it was because he was just trying to survive his job that was pushing him so hard. My husband also plays drums, so many Sundays he was being asked to play at different churches, and so we just weren't spending any time together. As soon as my fourth was born, it was like enough is enough. Um, Soon after actually before he was born, I called my husband. No, that's not true. Okay, sorry. My fourth was born. I knew enough was enough. I called my husband. I said, Ken, do you want to go? Do you want to stay home? And I'll go get a full-time job. I looked online. I said, I found a job, a math teaching job. It's full-time. I can start it. I'm sure that I'll get hired. And he said, yes, do it. He was so worn down at that point, and I was worn down too. And I knew that even being a full-time working mom is difficult. We know that that it's not like it's not the best of both worlds or anything, but I knew that it would be easier than what I was doing at that time. And my husband is excellent with the kids, and I knew that he would have no trouble being at home. His dad is also excellent um, in that way. So he said yes. I started working full time. Our first baby was about a year old, and we found out that we were going to be having a fifth baby. This last year has been so tumultuous with work. Things went sideways at work. I resigned from that job in about April, and then I started freelance writing right away, and I was able to pay our mortgage doing freelance writing, and we thought maybe this is it. My husband had quit his job. So, as I was saying, um, not exactly sure where I left off, but so what we have found now, I did some freelancing. My husband quit his job when I went back to work full time. But the great thing is, his boss has allowed him to stay on as a relief driver. So, whenever a day is extra full or he needs a little bit of extra help, he calls in and he calls on my husband and he works. So, what happened in the interim is I found an online teaching job, and I work for a large online teaching company. It is my first time working for a private company, I think, like ever since I started teaching. So, it has allowed me to work from home. It has allowed me to earn a full time salary, and my husband to continue to just work the random odds and ends that he is able to work. Around that same time that we made that switch, when we were deciding whether we should continue trying to do the freelance writing thing and put all that together, my husband had some health issues that made it impossible for him to work. So that was pretty scary for a little while because um, chronic health conditions, I mean, that's the thing, right? We're all working towards having this time freedom and all this stuff, but none of it is good if you don't have your health. And I think that's why a lot of people who are drawn to this, the FIRE movement or financial independence or time freedom, they're very into keeping their health solid, and that makes a lot of sense. So that's where we are now. There are some adjustments that we made to our family. One of the big ones is homeschooling. We've always been a homeschooling family, but I think if you want true time freedom, in many ways, you do have to just step out of systems that tie you to one location and to a specific schedule. So, homeschooling has always been a part of our family, and that's because I am kind of a snob about educational philosophy, and I've always wanted to homeschool my children. We really enjoy it. This year, we've been able to help a couple other families homeschooling as well. So, I am going to start talking a little bit more on this channel about the ways that we practically are moving towards this time freedom in our family and navigating like the difficult parts of it. Like, we are really struggling to keep a schedule, to stay on schedule with like appointments and stuff, and trying to schedule everything appropriately, and how to use all this time that we have together and how to communicate well about how we're using that time. So next video coming out is going to talk about how I plan our homeschool, and then I will talk a little bit more about how we're planning 2023. So thank you all so much. You all are so supportive on my channel, and I really appreciate it. I hope that going forward, I can report some really good news for you. I will talk about how the websites are doing coming up soon. It is what it is. We all have felt the turbulence, and landing in this full-time online job is not what I expected. It's not what I expected to be sitting here saying at the end of 2022, but it is the truth of where we are, and it feels good. Thanks so much. Bye.